Good afternoon, St. George. This is Michael Harding with On the Arts, that show that's dedicated to blowing the lid off of all those little secrets we have here in southern Utah, those artistic secrets. There are all sorts of things that we've got going on here in southern Utah, and most importantly, we've got a lot of things that people are doing. And by people, I mean those who aren't necessarily artists, those who are out there looking for art. Now, we've had a lot of things close recently. We had the production of The Odyssey at Dixie High School, penned by yours truly. And we also had Chicago, which I understand went very, very well. A very popular musical that was at the Stage Door that actually performed at the Electric Theater. We also have the Sears Gallery still open. There are a lot of wonderful exhibits in that. I very much encourage you to go check that out. I've been through several times, and it's wonderful. Every time you go through that museum, you have a different experience with some of the pieces in there. I'll go in and I'll walk around and say, was that there the last time I was there? And, it'll stand out to me. Now, we also have some things coming up. I would like to excuse my dear wife, who is also my co-host on this show. She's not here today because she is in her final rehearsals for Sylvia, which is opening at Kayenta Center for the Arts. It's a play that is being produced not only by Kayenta Center for the Arts, but also by Man of Two World Productions. That's Gary Morris and Kent Harrison Hayes, who have been guests on our show before. I believe that was all the way back in season 1, so it's almost time for us to have them on again. But Sylvia, a very, very fun play by A.R. Gurney, and those of you may know that playwright's name, and it's about a dog that becomes part of a family between a husband and a wife, and basically how a dog can separate and also bring them together, and of course a lot deeper issues as well. So that'll be opening this Thursday at the Center for the Arts at Kayenta. We also have, not next week, but the week after, The Wake of Jamie Foster is going to be performed here at Dixie State University. I always want to say Dixie State College, but that's what it was back 10 years ago when I began here. But here at Dixie State University, The Wake of Jamie Foster, of course, a wonderful play by the playwright Beth Henley. Many of you may know her work. You may know Crimes of the Heart, which is perhaps her most famous work. But she's a very, very prolific playwright and has written a wonderful play in The Wake of Jamie Foster about relationships, about what families can be, should be, really are, and what they were in the past. A wonderful play being performed by the students in a wonderful, wonderful way. So we invite you. That opens not a week from Thursday, but 2 weeks from Thursday. Now, it's always a pleasure to have in the studio a guest who is out there actually working on their art, who are doing what they say they're doing. There are a lot of people who have a constant debate, and I am one of these people. There are people who can play a song on the piano, but does that make them a pianist? There are some people who can imitate a dance or even do a dance very well. It might be a pop dance. I know a lot of people who can do the Thriller dance from the Michael Jackson video. I also know some people who can imitate very well the original Rite of Spring. These famous dances, or Swan Lake or something, they can do a piece of them. But does that make them a dancer? As somebody is up on stage performing lines, does that make them an actor? And there's a lot of legitimacy on both sides of this argument. There are people who say, well, unless you're a professional doing this, you're not really what you say you are. But then there are other people who say, if you're doing it, it has nothing to do with quality or the money that's backing up the project. If you're doing it, you are that thing. When I was over in England getting my MFA, I started working on a play, and I had never written a play before this time. And I was very humble about the piece that I came up with, and I was talking to one of my professors and said, I'm having a great time with this, but I'm not really a playwright. And I'll never forget, he sat me down and said, you wrote a play. You are a playwright. And that really got me thinking about this. I used to think you're not a real actor unless you're making money as an actor, unless you're out there being a professional actor. And I'll tell you, I've seen some amazing acting from people who weren't necessarily professionals, but people who really cared about the project they were acting. I've seen some beautiful, beautiful dancing from people who aren't necessarily professional dancers, but because they care about the piece that they're dancing. I've heard some people sing who, I have to be honest, it was not necessarily the most pleasing to my ear, but there's joy on their face and from their soul as they're singing. This is a conversation that we've had in many, many different capacities in the studio. I remember back to Paul Weens, who was a guest on our show in Season 1 and Season 2, as a matter of fact, and we talked about this very thing. Rachel Cox, who is a wonderful, wonderful singer and actress in her own right, talks about working with children and how they are some of the best artists out there. Because they don't care necessarily about quality. They're out there to sing because they love it. They want to have fun. I would say the same thing about children's theater groups or even finger painting classes that the children take. They take so much pride and they put so much of themselves into these pieces. I have to start questioning, was I correct years and years ago when I was thinking you got to be a professional to actually call yourself one of these? And I'll tell you, the jury's still out on that. I actually welcome anybody who has any thoughts about that. Please join and visit our page on Facebook, On the Arts, with Michael and Christina Harding. And I have absolutely no problems whatsoever if you'd like to post a comment, give us your opinion on that. Now, I do have to tell you, we are present on Facebook. Now, if you want to listen to us streaming live, you can go to Facebook on Radio St. George. That's radio space ST space George. And we have not only a live stream of this show, and by the way, that's not just radio, that is video as well. So if you ever want to find out what are the faces behind these voices, or I should say in front of these voices, check that out. Now, if you're not able to listen live on Facebook, please know that these shows are archived. You can go to that Facebook page, again, Radio Space ST Space George, and you can find any of our past shows archived. We also stream live on YouTube, so you can just type in On the Arts with Michael and Christina Harding, or even the name of our guests, and that's probably going to pop up. You can go back and check them out. I know several of our guests aren't necessarily thrilled about the fact that they are now forever on the internet, but please do check us out. And again, I invite you to share your comments or thoughts at On the Arts with Michael and Christina Harding on Facebook. Now, that was a very long opening monologue that's taking me to the guest that we have in the studio, somebody that we've been trying to get for a while, actually, and I am very, very happy to be joining us, Philippe Clark Hall. How are you today?
Thank you, Michael. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Now, I mentioned earlier that quite often people will hem and haw about what you are, not just you, but I'm using that generally. I have to say, looking at your resume, you are clearly a singer, clearly an actor, clearly a vocal coach. It's quite an impressive list that you got here.
Thank you.
Now, there are a few things that I want to discuss specifically from it, but first I have to start with the general question, who the heck are you and why are you here in St. George?
Oh, well, my name's Philippe Hall. Like you mentioned, I was actually born in Utah, in Ogden. That's where my mom's from. My dad's from Salt Lake. Beautiful part of the country, and we moved around quite a bit when I was young, and I ended up finishing high school in Arizona and finishing my Bachelor of Fine Arts, Music, Dance, Theater at BYU, and then I pretty much just started working immediately and found myself in Europe, in Germany. I thought I was going over there for a summer. You know, who would say no to, you know, a job in Europe during the summer, and well, it just ended up leading. One job led to the next, and I soon found myself there pretty well established, and 25 years later, I decided to come back to St. George. That's a very good question. Why St. George? My father lives here, and he just happened to have a rental property open and helped us out just getting relocated here. My wife is a professional dancer, dance educator, and she wanted to teach and experience how the dance world functions in the United States. It's very different than in Europe. And so she's really, really happy with her experiences here so far. And of course, my children are half German, half French, and American. So we've
half
got
German, half French, and the rest American.
Yeah, no. Well, I have two boys. They were born and raised in Germany, and my little girl, she was born in France. So we literally have 3 languages going on at home every day. And sometimes I don't know what the word is for what in which language.
Above and beyond that, you've got the different languages of the generations, I think.
Yeah.
having had two stepdaughters and two daughters of my own, there's a whole language out there that I think as an adult you don't get.
Yeah,
And-
that's true.
Right.
I noticed that more as soon as the teenage years start adding up. I'm like, yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you grew up, or you were in Utah. You were born in Ogden.
Yes.
And what got you going on the arts? Were your parents artistic? Did you just say, hey, I want to be a singer?
That's a good question. A lot of people have asked me that, and I've asked myself that, quite honestly. The truth is, my mother was a very excellent pianist and had us involved in the arts. I mean, my brother and I were in ballet when we were little, and I did Ballet West for Utah Ballet Company and Ballet West. I said Ballet West, and I did the Nutcracker and some other ballets for these companies growing up. But, you know, my ancestors are cowboys and very macho, and so when they made me start wearing tights, I quit. So it's very strange. It's very strange. And I was in choir. My mother had us singing, and I stopped singing altogether when my voice changed because it was so humiliating. Me performing and my voice cracked. I didn't sing again for 2 years.
Right.
And then we moved to Mesa, Arizona, and I met some new friends there, and I had an elective open, and one of my buddies said, you got to take choir. And I'm like, choir? Why? I said, that's where all the cute girls are.
Uh-huh.
So I blame women.
And look, if my wife were here right now, she would have something to say.
I hope so.
Well, I'll tell you, I've made no secret of the fact that's how I got into acting, as a matter of fact. There was a young lady in the drama club in high school, and the rest is history. By the way, we never did go out.
Right. But she
theater.
was there.
Absolutely.
She was there, yeah. Yeah, I started in choir at Mountain View High School, and fortunately I had a really great choir director, Mr. Perry, there, and learned a lot of things and found that I was singing well comparatively and got some good results for it. I was still doing sports and very much into that, and but I had an injury in my junior year, and so I shifted my focus to singing and just really dedicated myself to improving my singing, my sight reading, my musical skills, and ended up being in the All-State Jazz Choir and second chair in the All-State Choir. And then I went up to BYU and just randomly walked in the door, said, hi, my name's Philippe, I'd like to sing for you. And they offered me a scholarship. So I was pretty surprised, you know.
Right.
But it developed kind of without me planning it until I got to BYU and I started my Bachelor in Music Dance Theater, which is also a crazy story. I actually went to BYU to sing and to be on the ballroom dance team because I met another girl before my senior year. And my senior year, I took privately Latin American and standard dancing. And so my goal was to be on the touring company, which I was, and we were United States champions, Black Bull champions, world champions. So it was a fantastic experience. And when I got there, my dad asked me, so what are you going to major in? I'm like, well, He said, well, you could check out this major that I heard about. It's called Music Dance Theater. And I thought, okay, yeah, I can dance. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be singing and a little bit of acting. Should be fun. And we went into the head of the acting department, and he said, you're going to have, we're holding auditions day after tomorrow. And I thought to myself, auditions, why? You know, is there competition for this? Who really wants to study this?
Right.
And he said, well, yeah, you need to sing 2 songs, contrasting style. And I thought to myself, yeah, well, I had a big ego coming from high school, lots of success, no problem. And then you need to dance. And I said, wait a minute. He said, it's okay. We're going to teach you the combination. I said, okay, we'll do that. And then he said, you need to perform 2 monologues. And I literally said to him, Dr. Whitman, what's a monologue? And I don't know why he didn't, brush me off right then. But he took his time. He walked me to the school library, told me to buy this monologue book, learn 2, and we'll see you the day after tomorrow. So if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be sitting here today. The rest is kind of history. I went, I auditioned, I did my monologues. I'm sure they weren't fantastic, but they were pretty good. And we came to dancing, and it was pretty easy. I was coordinated athletics and had some dance, ballroom, Latin, and then they said, now you've got 32 bars to show us your best stuff. And there were people, in tights and leg warmers and jumping around. And, I was in a completely different world at that time. And I was in jeans, normal clothes. and they started playing the music. I had no idea what they were going to do or what I was going to do. And then there was luckily a song that I've been dancing to at the nightclubs. So I just busted it into my nightclub routine. And then they said, well, we take 6 students every year. And I thought, what? What? Who? What? I had no idea what I was getting into. And long story short, my name was on the list, and I absolutely loved it. They were my people. We just had wonderful friendships and a fantastic time, excellent training. I really struggled in acting, I have to tell you, Michael, because I didn't know, but for those 5 years or so that I was there, BYU won the national Irene Ryan competition every year in solo and scene, and I was with the top kids in the country. Of course, I had no idea, but they really pushed me. And my first year and a half out of college, all I did were plays. Nobody really believed me. I couldn't believe it myself. I'm getting hired as an actor. Right. I struggled for 4 years. It wasn't until my 3rd year when I had a really great professor that had graduated from the Denver Center that unlocked me, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. The National Theater Conservatory there? Yeah.
So, we had really grateful for her. And like I said, this was not planned very far in advance. Really happened when I got to the university level, and then it just clicked, and I loved it and just went crazy for it. I was going to school, ballroom dance company at 7 in the morning, going to school straight till 4:30, and then driving out to the dance club, also national champion company, out there and being in class with them from 6 to 9:30. I lived and breathed and ate it.
Gotcha. And that's kind of what it does to you. It consumes you.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, when I was an undergrad, I was a double major. I was psychology and acting. And finally, my psychology teachers had to sit me down and they say, are you ever going to come to class? Are you ever going to do the requirements? And it's because I was spending all my time at the theater.
Wow. I thought, you have a special way of looking at people. Now I know why.
I'm looking into your soul right now.
You're analyzing me right now.
It's something that I've always called bishop eyes. And I love it when you see those eyes and you want to confess something, even if you have nothing to confess. It's just, oh my gosh. Now, looking at your resume here, and you mentioned that you came from the club, to audition for the musical theater program and such. You've actually worked with a lot of different musical ensembles.
Yes.
I know that you have a fantastic operatic voice, and we'll get into your resume for opera in just a bit. But do you find it difficult to go from opera to jazz to pop, all of these different styles?
Well, I also was very lucky when I was at BYU. There was a guest professor there named Jan Sullivan, and she was one of the first researchers to research the belt pop voice and write a book and develop a technique on teaching that. That's why she was there, to train their staff. And she took me under her wing, but she was an opera singer before she even started doing this research. She was very much a pioneer in this field, and I feel very fortunate to have been able to work with her. So she, right from the beginning, instilled in me the belief that you can sing whatever you want with your voice. And in fact, this has been, as you mentioned, it's been kind of a hallmark of my career, the crossover guy and triple threat and whatever. I haven't really tried to limit myself to one genre. I've always tried to adapt what I'm doing to fit in that genre. I was actually going to pursue my PhD and in exactly this topic. And that my research led me to the Complete Vocal Institute in Denmark. And I realized that Catherine Sutherland had been doing this for the past 20 years and had discovered some amazing things. And that is my teaching premise today as well. The fundamentals of your instrument are the fundamentals of just your biomechanical machine. You have airflow. The airflow brings your vocal folds to a pulsation that creates a sound wave. The sound wave travels up through your vocal tract. And that's the cool part, that that is where the instrument is. And we don't have a fixed instrument. We can change our instrument. So if the first two parts are working properly and you know the shape to put on top, you can literally sing anything you want.
That's really cool, actually. I'll tell you, the first time I was exposed to crossover singing, and by the way, I am not an expert on this whatsoever. You talk about being a triple threat. I think I've told people I'm kind of a triple irritant rather than a threat. I consider myself an actor, I can carry a tune in a bucket if the bucket is about a mile away and it's made of plexiglass. And as far as dancing goes, we actually had this conversation last week as we were talking about some dance with Chris Mills of the Cedar City Junior Ballet. I can, take 3 steps forward and usually not trip. That's about where I am in my dance training. So not a triple threat. And by the way, those of you who are listening, that's actually a reminder that Cedar City Junior Ballet is actually opening this week. They have 2 performances on Friday and Saturday of this week of Peter and the Wolf with the score by Prokofiev, which is very, very well known. They're doing an original version of that with a live orchestra. And they are also going to be doing a Hans Christian Andersen story, the show Puppet Man. Now, I would highly recommend you check that out. It's $15 at the door at the Heritage Center Theater in Cedar City. Just wanted to make sure I got that plug in there.
That's great. I'm glad you said that because I really appreciate the fact that it's with a live orchestra. That is really a luxury nowadays, and that sounds like a lot of fun.
I think definitely. I had the pleasure of working with them last year on their original ballet, The Secret Garden, and it's amazing how... Now, this is a word that's up for debate and controversial, and again, I do invite our audience to share their thoughts, but it's very professional in there. Even though it is community ballet, everybody who auditions gets in. They create a product that I am blown away by, absolutely stunned by. Now, we got a little off topic there, which I have to tell you is not hard to do with me. My students in my classroom, they know that that's the easy way out of whatever assignment we're doing. But I was talking about crossover.
Yeah.
And I remember when Les Miserables came out, and I was in high school. Les Miserables, that was the musical. It was amazing. And I still have a lot of fondness for that musical, as do a lot of people. And of course, my fondness and my appreciation of it has changed over the last 2, 3, 5, 6, decades. But I remember Colm Wilkinson, when he sang the role of Jean Valjean, I had never heard a voice like his, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. This is the ultimate artistry. And I also found out that he did a lot of pop singing. And he actually went to a lot of the hair band style when it came down to that. I think it's funny that you and I are talking about hair band. I wear a baseball cap to cover it up here, but you're out there shining.
I've got my halo on.
You got pride. But I'll tell you, when I heard that he actually crossed over in his style, I thought that was the coolest thing. The fact that here was this guy singing Bring Him Home from Les Miserables, and then he was going singing Whitesnake covers and such.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult. I'll be honest. I've talked to a lot of different singers, and some of my colleagues, their agent will not allow them to do anything else because they build a reputation as one thing. And I know, so I'm thinking of my friend. He's a very famous international Wagnerian tenor. And I talked to another colleague of mine, and he'd been around the world as an opera singer. And he said, yeah, I started singing death metal. I was doing this. And he said, it just doesn't. You don't tell people that.
Right.
You don't tell everybody that. And I actually had gotten away from the classical for quite some time, done a lot of these pop, rock, galas, and also a lot of different musicals. And musicals pretty broad style. So you have your hard rock musicals, you have your more classical musicals, and you literally have everything in between. So you really have to be quite flexible as a musical singer. And then for some reason, again, I don't know, I just felt that I had this passion, this desire to sing opera. And so I went back to school while I was in Germany and working there and did my master's in voice performance, classical opera singing. And I was quite well known amongst the theaters at the time, and no one that I knew who really liked me would let me audition for the opera. And I was getting really annoyed. So what I did is I went and auditioned for people that didn't know me, and they hired me. You get put in kind of, they say in German, just a drawer of who you are, what you can do, and auditioning is difficult. I compare auditioning as letting someone look at you through a keyhole for 1.5 seconds, and they then make a judgment about who you are as an artist, which is completely ludicrous. I mean, they get a split-second view of you and automatically put you in the drawer. So it can be really a tough business. And just because of that, I had a good reputation, and nobody wanted to hear me sing opera. They wanted me to tap dance and sing, the Broadway show tunes. And then I had musical directors because I played the villain.
Mm-hmm.
I like playing villains. And they wouldn't then hire me for the happy, quirky ingenue. And I had to go and audition 3 times for this director and convinced him, and then he was happy. And he only let me do it because the choreographer was really pushing him. But you do get put in like a little drawer in stereotyped, and that is really difficult, I think, for all artists, especially because as an artist, one of the things you want to do is be versatile, and show that versatility. And you think you're trained in your training to believe that you need to be versatile, and you get out in the marketplace and people don't want you to be so versatile.
Mm-hmm.
So generally they want specialists, and they're always surprised, oh, didn't know you could do that. So it did take me a while to get into the opera scene, and I had to go through channels that were completely new. I had to go out and audition against international competition. And to be honest with you, the song, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Nowadays, if you're singing opera, even musical, that really applies to Germany because the entire world goes to audition there. There are more, there's more work, more employment in Germany because of this great cultural tradition and support for the arts that is, part of their culture. And hopefully it will continue, we never know. Right. Times do change, but you are literally singing up against Russians and Eastern Bloc countries, Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, Australians, Africans, South Americans, Canadians, the entire world, and the rest of Europe. So I feel like that is really where the international competition takes place nowadays for work. And there's a tremendous amount of talented people, really a tremendous amount of talented people. So tip for all you actors and performers out there, if you're auditioning, just keep auditioning, keep working on your skills, keep polishing your skills and doing your best. The best thing you can do is represent yourself well. At one point, there's going to be a director or an artistic director out there that sees something in you that they want in their show. And then comes your real audition. Your real audition is when you do finally get that chance, do a great job. Just really be dedicated and be professional. So I think if you don't mind me going on, you can see Michael's not the only one that can talk forever. But you talked about...
We will battle to the death.
About being professional and what's the difference. I totally agree that being an artist is very different than being perhaps a professionally employed artist. But it is the same thing. Being an artist is expressing yourself. And if you paint and you never sell a painting, that doesn't mean you're not an artist. Art is just a different form of communication. We call it the fine arts because it's a very specific way of communication. A lot of us, and a lot of times people say it's a higher or transcendent form of communication. You know what it's like when you hear a song that touches you or you see a piece that moves you. You see it happens to you on the radio and in the movies as well. So it's still fine arts. It's this communication level. So you don't have to be an employed professional artist to be an artist. And on the other hand, it is a very different game when you are consistently out there against international competition and you have to feed yourself and your family and pay your rent and live off of it and do that consistently for 30 years. I think I'm pretty proud of that, actually. I'm proud that I made it. I remember thinking in college, I've got a lot of great professors. I'm learning a lot, but how many of them actually live this profession? And I wanted to teach and share, but I made that determination. That was just something important to me. That doesn't mean it has to be the same for you, for our listeners. You get to do your own journey, but it was important for me to actually experience it and get out there and do it. And I absolutely love it.
Good.
And I'm reminded every time I'm on stage, I just feel like this is where I belong. And so I love the experience. I love the sharing. But the business side of it is just that. It's business, just like any other big business. It's tough. You got to be tough, and you just have to deliver a great product, and then you will get hired. Someone will buy your product.
Well, you got to remember, it is show business.
Yes.
Well, and I'll tell you, it is really hard to make it out there, and I'm actually very, very proud of my career as well. I've always looked at auditions as a little different than being scary. And this is something I do try to get across to my students. You're absolutely right. They're looking at you through a keyhole. They're making judgments about you just on a small, sometimes just 20 seconds, sometimes 3 minutes, depending on what kind of audition. And I have to say, once you get over the fact that you have no control of that, I actually enjoy auditioning myself because it's a one-man show and I have a captive audience right there.
Yeah.
It can be a lot of fun, a very fun business, I'd say.
That's a great tip.
Now, I am going to ask you, you've done a lot of opera, some hardcore opera, I'm going to say, and you've also done a fair amount of straight plays. You've done some comedies and also musical theater. What's the difference between the operatic world and the theater world, for example?
Wow, that's a very good. I think the process is very different. The rehearsal process, the preparation process, also the goal and the stylistic demands are different. I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours, but
how dare we on a talk show?
How dare we? I find that I really like the acting process because you really get into a lot more detail than you will ever get into in musical and opera. That sounds like it's just true. It's true, people. I'm sorry. It's true. Right. You get into a lot more detail because you have time. You don't have to deal with choreography and music. And that's like splitting your rehearsal time in 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're preparing a musical, you've got the dancing, you've got the music, rehearsals, dance rehearsals, and scenic rehearsals. You just don't have the time. So as an actor, you really get to concentrate on subtext and motivations and history and all this great stuff that I love. And if you want to give that element to your performance as a musical performer or in the opera, you end up having to do most of that research yourself. And I think that does make a very big difference, and you can see it on stage and feel it in those people that have done that preparation. And then again, in the opera, you have to prepare so much on your own. You have a luxury if you have 4 to 6 weeks rehearsals, which is pretty much standard in European theaters. 6 weeks is your basically standard professional rehearsal period. It's not a lot of time. And if you show up, I remember I showed up to my first opera. It was a children's opera. Luckily, it wasn't on a big stage, but it was pretty famous theater. I didn't know anything on the first day. And the musical director almost had a heart attack. Because in the opera, you need to come... You prepare the role maybe even 2 years in advance. If you've been offered a big role in a really difficult musical piece, you get the offer 2.5, 3 years in advance. And they prepare that for 2 years, and it's so much preparation and so much time goes into it. My first big opera job was singing in Russian. And I'd never sung in Russian before, so what did I do?
Did you know Russian?
No,
at
I
all?
didn't. My voice teacher at the time, he was coaching a Russian girl, and he said, well, just ask her to sit down with you. So I did, and I recorded her voice pronouncing these words, and she was kind of cute, and I noticed, wow, this language is better than French. It's amazing. And it's a lot of passion in Russian. So I got to the opera, and I'd been preparing this piece for 9 months. Not this piece, this part with my coach. And I got to the first rehearsal, and boy, I was glad I did, because I got to that first rehearsal. It was not just me and the director and musical director in the room. It was me, the director, the musical director, the conductor, the choir, house choir of 40 people, all of the international soloists, the extra choir of another 40 people, and the children's choirs of 30 children. There were like 130 people waiting for my first note, and they'd already started, been rehearsing for 3 weeks. Woo! That was
just
pressure.
A little bit of pressure.
That was pressure, and but thank goodness I had prepared myself. So that's a big difference for big opera parts. You really need to prepare very far in advance. Usually you go to a musical and they'll teach you the music rehearsals when you get there. Well, no chance. Don't ever do that in the opera. You'll be most likely walking out the door the other way.
Wow.
In about 5 minutes.
And isn't it true? I mean, for every performer in opera, they can find dozens of musicians that can come in and do it.
Well, Yes, we like to think we're irreplaceable, you know.
That's right.
They can't buy my shine up here. No, seriously, there are plenty of talented people out there, but they do, if they cast you, they really want you. They saw something in your personality that they want to work with. And there's nothing more disappointing than when an artist shows up unprepared.
Right. Well, and you do have some projects coming up in Germany. And I say projects. I mean, let's look at the number of years you've been over there working and such. What do you have coming up?
This year I'm singing an opera it's an operetta. It's called Ball im Savoy by Paul Abraham. Paul Abraham is a composer, 20s and 30s. And that's before musical, existed really in today's form. So operetta was the musical of the time. Operetta is just opera with dialogue in between. It's not that much different. Even though the serious opera singers, if I'm doing Wagner or Puccini, then they really mock the operetta. But believe me, there's some really big sings in operetta. And you have to dance and you have to speak on stage. So
Gilbert and Sullivan, what do you mean?
My goodness. So this is a great part. I play Aristide. He's the leading male singer, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great comedy, and I love the comedy style of the 30s in Germany. The 30s in Germany were the 60s revolution in Europe that we had in the 60s, right? So the humor and the jokes are very, very witty. They played a lot on the words and the dialogues and the situation comedy. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of beautiful music. People really have a good time with that. And they needed a Tony in West Side Story.
Right.
And they asked me if I would do that. And I said, sure. And then they said, will you do it in German? And I've said, sure.
Right.
So yeah, I have to relearn the part in German. But I have a friend we called him the national Tony because he'd done Tony in so many pieces. And he said German is actually a very good sing. The vowel lines are great for it. And then just literally 2 weeks ago, they called me up and said, we need a Joe Gillis in Sunset Boulevard. Do you think you can pull that off? I've said, sure. And now I find myself having to prepare 2 pieces, 2 shows.
Right.
Learn them by video, prepare them in another language, and all the dialogue. Joe Gillis has a lot of dialogue, and now it's going to be in German. So yeah, I'm going to be really busy. I actually had a few nightmares where I was there at the show, everything's going great, and then I realized I didn't learn my song. Nightmares like that, it's a bit scary. So I'm feeling the pressure subconsciously, and believe me, I've really done a lot, put a lot on my plate before, but quality is very important for me. Quality is very important for me. So I really want to prepare these well. The National Theater in Nuremberg asked me if I'd learned Don Lockwood, the lead in Singing in the Rain, and for one performance, and they sent me the videos, and I had two weeks to learn it. The tap routines, everything on video.
Whoa.
And it took me a lot of time. And but that show was one of my special experiences in theater where, I mean, maybe it was the pressure of just being so concentrated for so long, but that show was as near to a perfect performance that I've ever done.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience, yeah.
I'll say some of the finest performances I've ever given or seen were by people who had to come in at the last minute, and their adrenaline is just pumping.
Yeah, it could be a little bit of that. So, yeah, I've got that going on. I'm also preparing online courses for singing and putting a book together and run my vocal academy here. So there's a lot going on at the moment, but it's exciting.
And so this is part of the training that, if I understand correctly, you're one of 4 that teach this method?
Yeah, I'm one of 4 U.S. citizens that have actually gone to Denmark, gone to the Complete Vocal Institute, and have been trained there at the Complete Vocal Institute. It takes 3 years. It's pretty intensive training. So just to fly back and forth all the time is very inconvenient for Americans. So I lived there at the time, so it was more convenient for me. But yeah, it's really fantastic. It surprises me. It's like having a secret, you know? It's like I know stuff that hasn't hit the mainstream market yet because the research is out there. It's been published. It's been peer-reviewed. But it's, we're talking about the last 5 years and that it even started making a wave was 10 years ago, and then they had to prove that, their theories and everything were real and it was safe for the voice. So, yeah, it's very, very cutting edge information.
Uh-huh.
And I've just been really pleased with the results of the singers that I've been able to work with. That's exciting. I mean, I planned on teaching later on in life. That was like going to be my retirement thing, but I didn't expect to enjoy it as much.
Right.
I really, really get into it. And I think it's one thing to be on stage and feel this adrenaline and feel like this is my calling and it's special and I'm communicating with the audience and they're happy and they're getting the message. But that's very personal, egotistical in a way, because it's a personal experience. I don't mean that in a negative sense, but it's just something I experience. But when you actually help somebody to get closer to their dream, and you help them to accomplish their goals, and you see the joy and the surprise and wonderment in their face, and then hear their voice open up. That's so nice.
Yeah.
It's really satisfying.
I think almost every artist that we've had in the studio have talked about the importance of teaching and the thrill that comes from teaching. And it doesn't even have to be at a formal institution. Just the fact that you're passing on something that you know, a joy of something that you know.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, I have to ask you, because you are about teaching and such,
right.
Say we have a parent out there who has a child who wants to be a singer.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do? How do they prep for this?
That is one of the hardest things to do, honestly, because I was in that situation. I was like, who do you go to?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you trust? How do you know that you're going to get your money's worth? And that sounds a little silly, but you most people, they just say, oh, your daughter can sing. Who's she taking a lesson from? And that's the traditional path. Or they'll hear somebody sing and they'll think, you've got a beautiful voice. Can you teach my child? It's because people don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know where to go. And I think that I'll just give you a recipe. And that my recipe is find somebody that's actually been educated how to teach at perhaps a university level or a college level at least. Find somebody that you like the way they sing.
Mm-hmm.
And find somebody that has performing experience. If you've performed, you have to learn to use your instrument under pressure. It's completely different demands. So, and at the same time, somebody that's famous, I had a very, very famous professor at the university, did not help me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Vocally, it was 2 years wasted. I actually learned how to sing from one of the people we call a repetitor. The guy is a walking encyclopedia, and not only did he conduct orchestras and sing leading tenor parts in the operas in Germany, he was also a fantastic pianist. He's just amazing. So I learned a lot from him. But the very famous, fantastic singer, it would only work for the students that needed those things that he had to learn to make his voice work. So that's not going to work for everybody.
Right.
I spent, good 3 years under supervision teaching people, and it was really frustrating for me in the beginning because we only had a 20-minute slot. You had to teach somebody and help them in 20 minutes. And that really put a lot of pressure on us, but it improved the process. And not just singing is pretty simple mechanically. Airflow, vibration, sound, form of the instrument, there you go. It's pretty simple. But the key is how do you communicate with another human being? People have different learning types. Some people want to see things, need to see things. Some people like to hear things and then they can copy it. Some people need to feel it in their body. Some people just imagine things. I have, a 10-year-old student right now. She's the most imaginative singer I've ever worked with. It's all flamingos, mosquitoes, monkeys with a banana in their mouth, and it works.
Uh-huh.
So it's the way you communicate the information, and a singer wants results. If you can reach them and you have a multitude of tools and angles how to reach that person, it's all about the results. So if I'm talking with one person about the shape of their mouth and the height of their larynx and the air pressure going through, or if I'm just saying to somebody, imagine a monkey with a banana in its mouth,
right.
and I get the same result, that's effective work.
A result is a result.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. Well, you've mentioned that you're setting up a vocal academy here, and you're actually underway with this academy.
Right.
What are you doing to expand yourself? How do people get a hold of you?
Well, I think that's a battle that every business is in, is getting exposure and getting the people know about you, know something's going on. So yeah, I started the academy in September, and it's a September to May program, 9 months. And we're having a fantastic time in the academy. The academy is an education in singing. So all of my singers, they know now the anatomy of the voice. They've seen pictures of how the vocal folds are pulsating and moving. They can recognize the inside of your larynx. If you give them a picture of it, they can tell you what parts they are. So they're not only learning how to sing, they're learning about really how it works and the anatomy, and they're learning how to sing with a microphone. They're learning performance techniques. They're learning a lot of things. So the academy for me is much more of an education than it is just singing lessons. And I created it because I noticed that a singer will come to me generally and they'll want to be able to sing a song. And what ends up happening is you give them the tools to sing that song, and you think that they're going to continue on and develop a vocal technique through that method, but it's not really how it works. It takes a lot more time with a one-on-one lesson to develop vocal technique than it does to be in a group class where you're learning a myriad of different things all at the same time, having a good time. There's a social aspect to it, performing in front of each other. They get over their nerves, their stage fright, they gain confidence, they make friendships, and this helps them assimilate the information at a different level. And you can also present more information to several people at a time. If I'd have to present that same information to each one of those singers individually, it would take me 5 times as long.
Right.
So my goal was to accelerate their learning process by having an academy, something that I experienced myself at the Complete Vocal Institute, except their academy is more for professional and amateur singers, and it's 3.5 months straight every day. And so I've just taken the same program and spread it over 9 months.
Well, Philippe, you mentioned earlier that it takes a long time. I have to tell you, that's a perfect segue into, we have run out of time in this session. I just looked down at the clock, and we are at the end. Now, there's so much more we could talk about. We have made a slight dent in your resume. I do hope you'll consider coming back at some point to join us here at On the Arts.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to get all my Academy singers out there that wanted to say hello. We got to get them in here and let them talk about it.
Unfortunately, we are out of time now, but yeah, we can bring them back. And I do want to say thank you very much. Do check out Philippe Clark Hall. You can also find information on our webpage, On the Arts with Michael and Christina Harding. You can check out the live video of this. If anything was said that was inspirational, I hope so. Had a great time having you here in the studio. And we do ask that all of our listeners keep your ear to the ground for all of these wonderful opportunities to not only be an audience member or observe, but also get involved. If you like to make music, go out there and make music. If you like to act, get out there and act, or paint, get out there and paint, or dance, get out there and dance.
Express yourself.
Absolutely. And until you hear from us again, we hope that you'll keep your focus on the arts.